This program is brought to you by the Virtual Visitation Network, which was initiated in March, and it was part of our church's response to the pandemic. We're interested in making sure we have strong connections with people via the computer, the phone, and mail with our members. We're interested in communication, timely communication about services, church events, and updates, and about readiness, supplies, and notices that are needed. If you see our updated health ministry pages, you'll see there's a section on what are some resources, and we are updating those on a regular basis. We had just a new food resource, the ENCA in Winchester is offering a small food bank, and that information is now up on our site. So the purpose of today is to think about how in this time of staycation, where we are all finding ourselves being in limited areas, how do we broaden that, expand it, see everything, that all the potential that it offers. And I hope that in our themes today, you will widen your horizon as to how you might enjoy, how you might connect with and appreciate the natural world that is in your own backyard and your neighborhood, and on walks in the fells. With that as a little bit of an intro, I just want to say during our presentations of our five presentations, we're going to have everyone on mute. At the end of that, there's an open discussion time, and we need to ask each of you to remember to unmute yourself, because we can't unmute you, but you will probably see movements if for some reason that doesn't, if you don't realize that we're not hearing you. You'll see our hands probably dancing back and forth. And then finally, Megan is going to close us with a reflection and as we depart. And I want to say up front, so I do not forget, none of this is possible without John Crabtree and Andy Spiegel. They have been they're kind, wonderful, knowledgeable. They make it fun. And thank you, thank you, thank you. They're truly a gift during this time, all the time, but especially now. So why don't we get started? And I had asked Liz, who is in Rhode Island, if she would be glad to share with us a scripture reflection, or two scripture reflections. Thank you, Liz.
Our first scripture reading is from the book of Genesis, very familiar to all of us, the story of creation. This is the sixth day of creation, when the animals and the plants and the people were created. So this comes from Genesis 1, verses 29 through 31. God said, "See, I have given you every plant, every living thing that moves upon the earth. I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And so it was. God saw everything that he made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. The second reading is also from the Old Testament. This is from the book of Job. Remember how Job was very frustrated and had terrible problems in his life, and yet he thought that he knew that God had formed all of nature and had made everything perfect. And this is what Job had to say. This is from the 12th chapter of Job, verses 7 through 10. "But ask the animals, and they will teach you, the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of every human being. The word of the Lord.
Thank you, Liz. Well, I hope that sets the foundation as we listen to our various presenters share their backyard delights. And we're going to start with Lucas Friedel, who is up in Vermont. And thank you, Lucas, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Oh. I'm Lucas, Lucas Pradle. I'm 11, and I'm going into 6th grade at McCall Middle School. This summer, we had a lot of space and a lot of time, so we came up to Vermont, and because we can go outside, we can go hiking around here, because there's not as many cases here, and people are pretty good about it. And so this summer we came up, and since we had a lot of time and a lot of space to use that time, I had some time to work on some of my hobbies. I begged my parents to let me get a beehive, and I promised them that I would do all the work myself, and I would do the research and find the materials for it. And a few weeks later, and I had my nucleus colony, and we brought it down. We bought it from a bee yard in Massachusetts on the way up to Vermont, and I'm going to show you a hive inspection. A usual hive inspection takes around 10 minutes, but Mom cut it down to about 3, so there's a lot of things missing.
Obviously.
The suit is far too big for me.
Who was that?
I'm Dina Pradle.
And I'm Lucas Pradle.
And this summer we've been living full-time in our cabin in Vermont, which has given us the time and space to plant a giant garden, and also for Lucas to explore his interest in beekeeping. So we got our bees back in early June. We bought what's called a nucleus colony, which is a queen and her established hive. We picked up this box at a local apiary, threw it in the car, and then brought it up here and transferred the bees to their hive. Now, when we got it, we had about 5,000 bees. And what would you say we're up to now?
Around 35,000, about 45,000.
So Lucas is going to show you what we look for when we do a hive inspection.
First step is to open up the top of the hive. If there's any water there, tip that off first. Then the first layer of bees have what is called a honey super. This is just a shallow box where the queen can't come to, and it has it's a honey storage.
Okay, and now what are you doing?
Right now I'm smoking them so they don't become too agitated. Right now this is an area where the queen lays her eggs and the larvae. This is the brood chamber area, and right here we have the feeder so that the bees can eat.
And what are you looking for when you take them out?
So I'm looking also to make sure that they have enough food. And you see this entire frame here? This frame is entirely honey. You can see because of the dark spots on it. And they still haven't gotten over to fully waxing this side yet. New wax is always white. It only becomes yellow after a small while. And this one, there's tons of bees on it, so you can't really see it. But on this side here, this is where all the brood is. And there's little tiny eggs and larvae in there, in their different stages of development.
And where does the queen hang out?
The queen usually hangs out in the bottom of the box.
Okay.
So I think we're done here now.
So Lucas, what have you learned being a first-time beekeeper this year?
Definitely that there's a lot more to it than people assume. You need to take care of your bees, but they're also more self-sufficient than pets. Like you need to feed a dog or a cat, but with bees they can feed themselves. All you need to do is make sure that they don't have any diseases, that they're all healthy, they have enough food, and that they have a queen.
So Lucas, I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit about do you belong to a club, or who do you call when you have questions? And what has that been like? Do you have some teachers with this? You're on mute. Okay.
No, I'm unmuted. So there's a beekeeping club about an hour and a half away, and there's a few scattered around Vermont, but none in our immediate vicinity. But there's one at the edge of New Hampshire that we go to, and they have a beekeeper Zoom every other Monday, and you go on there and share pictures and ask questions. So.
Great. And is there any advice that you would give someone who might be thinking about doing this?
Definitely that you should not be intimidated by getting bees. They're very gentle, and they don't want to hurt you at all. They just want to get food and make sure that no one steals that food.
And your first, the honey that you have now, you won't be able to take any until next year. Is that correct?
You definitely can take some in the first year, but it's not advised because they still need to build up. And we got our hive a little late. If you want to get a new hive, it's definitely recommended to get it very early on in spring. And we need to make sure that they have enough honey to survive the winter, because a hive needs around 100 to 180 pounds of honey every year, but they produce around 200 or more pounds of honey a year.
Well, we want to thank you, and I know that over this course of the next year, when people get to see you, they'll be asking about how things are going. So we are so
honey will definitely be on the way.
Pardon me?
Honey will definitely be on the way.
Great, that's great. So, well, thank you. And we're going to transition now to Jim Stansfield, and later there's time for open discussion. So if you have more questions for Lucas, that's fine. It was in a conversation with Jim and his wife that I first got this idea for a staycation gathering. And it was because of the love of for their backyard and the way in which it's evolved over the years. So Jim was one of the first people I asked if he would take part today. So Jim, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Jim Stansfield, and I've lived in Winchester for 37 years with my wife, and only been in the church for a couple of years. I'd like to try and explain what the garden means to me and how it came to be the way it is. When we moved in, the people before us, Mr. Filler was 92, and he'd lived here for 40 years, probably in his retirement. And I can tell from how the garden was that he'd had a wonderful garden, but it had really overgrown. It's a small garden, the layout is, he had a lawn, which is sloping up, and then a rocky hill at the back. And behind our lot, there's a field, which is fortunate, no one can build on it. So when I came, of course, moved in, I had all these ideas of the perfect garden I wanted to build. And that changed as I discovered how things work out in real life. I built a couple of beds right on the edge of the lawn and the rocky hill for Janet, for growing herbs and growing strawberries. The strawberries, of course, needed a net over them to keep the squirrels away. First introduction to wildlife, I guess. But over the last 30 years, bit by bit, I've built terraces on the back because it's so rocky so that things can grow there. And I've eventually, since neither Janet or I really went for lawns, have taken over the lawn and built beds in that. And what we have now is a really complicated arrangement in a small space that is sort of magical. It has lots of paths around and steps and terraces, and we're not the only ones who enjoy it. Kids, we don't have kids, but the kids who've been here have liked running around the paths, and the animals do too. So all the squirrels who have their own routes through the trees know our backyard so well, they know all the ways through. So that's how it's evolved. It started out, it was very open, and it's filled in. The shrubs have grown taller. The plants have decided where they want to be. If they don't like where they are, maybe I'll move them. Or one will volunteer someplace because that's the right habitat for it. And we've both liked birds. We've loved birds. So I put a bird feeder up at the very beginning, and the squirrels, of course, noticed it. And that's a whole different story that would take 10 minutes. But I trained the squirrels to be a certain kind of gymnast, I think. We provide water. I go out, even in winter, every day, several times a day, to change the water. And that's the most crucial thing for the birds and the animal. You see, it's just wonderful to see a squirrel coming up in the garden. The first thing it will do is go and take a lap from the water. You just know you're doing something good. And they have nesting material and places to protect them. So over the years, basically, I've noticed more and more wildlife and got to know them. So some of them you see every day, and I've given them a name. And then after several years of knowing them and being able to give them a peanut because they're familiar with me, they feel safe enough, and then the next year they'll bring their children. So tiny little squirrels will come to play because they feel safe. And several generations of this. And my wife and I, walking through Winchester, saw a black squirrel years ago in the middle of town. And we wished we had a black squirrel. Well, I'd go for walks, and then the next generation was a little closer. And then for a period of 5 or 6 years, longer than that, we had black squirrels in the backyard. We've had red squirrels, gray squirrels. And my latest thing is the hummingbirds, which unfortunately aren't in the video. So people, when they see it, are very surprised. In the back of this little lot is this really complicated garden. And they think of it as an English garden. You might be able to tell that I come from England. And it's not as well tended as an English garden. It's natural. I started out with plans to have this thing a particular way, and it ended up, it's a collaboration with nature. I'm essentially just a conductor. Nature does its thing, the animals do their thing. And when I go and sit out there and look at it, I feel as though I'm just another animal in the garden. It's really quite wonderful. So anyway, I assembled this video of clips from the last 10 years or so. And it only shows you a little bit, but I hope it gives you an idea of what this garden means to me. Welcome to Wild Haven. This is the view from our patio bench. We've enjoyed watching the garden here for over 35 years. We can also see the activity through the kitchen window. Here's a bird's eye view of the feeder. This is Phinia. Her grandmother was Sable, our first black squirrel. One year, a robin made its nest in the tree right outside an upstairs window. A
baby rabbit and a baby squirrel are about to meet for the first time. This spring, Mrs. Robin regularly asked me for seed for her chicks. And for 3 years, Mrs. C. the cardinal came to our patio table for seed. Sometimes we see red squirrels. They are really cute and very quick. When the hawk's about, the others move out. Carolina wrens are very inquisitive. We taught the chipmunks that this chair serves peanuts. When they run off with their prize in their cheeks, they rattle. Here's how the squirrels work on their tummy muscles. The grackles like corn too. They soften it first in the bird bath. Now 2 of Lopa's children take some time to play. Lopa was my friend for many years. The end.
Well, I feel like we've taken, let's see, I feel like we've taken a walk in your backyard on some of those trails, Jim. And I'm wondering if you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share about the importance of gardening in one's life.
Well, it's meant a lot to me over the years, just being able to sit out there. And I've learned about the critters or the kids or the animals, whatever you say, to respect them, and that how important trust is. That if I just go out there and sit there, eventually they get to know me and think I'm just a member of the garden. And then they'll come and say hello, and then I can get to know them. And the other thing is, it's changed my idea of time, in that I've seen the garden develop over 30 years. I see it go through the seasons, and it's different every year. I see it go through the days. It's different morning to night. And I see it in different weathers. And I know in another month, the sedum will be blossoming. And Lucas, it will be filled with bees. And you're welcome to come and borrow them if you want.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. And again, there'll be a time where other people may want to ask questions. But when we were in our rehearsal the other day, you had really underscored the importance of stillness in the garden and how that is such a way of connecting. And so we thank you for that. So Sonia and Isaac, I think you have some wisdom to share with us. And can you tell us your ages?
I'm Sonia Niece and I'm 9.
And I'm Isaac Niece, and I'm 12.
Okay.
So they aren't blooming anymore, but you can occasionally find them. In the spring, we would find lady slippers when we were walking our dog into Fells. On one walk we found 45 of them, which is our record, and it stands, hence, and it still stands.
And maybe they can show that. You can show the presentation.
I have a pretty good eye for them.
Wait. And we have a little presentation we can share if John has it.
Yeah. Backyard delights, as you can see, minis. Okay, next page. Next page. Our backyard. Apologize for the photo, but this is this one. Next page. Okay, next. Okay, hey, What are lady slippers? Lady slippers are a kind of endangered flower due to deer population. You see, deer like to eat lady slippers. They just eat the flower partly from the stem behind. Oh yeah, and the leaves. leaves. That's because they are very, yeah. They bloom between May and July in the woods. They take a long time to grow from their seed to flower. They can take around 5 years. All right, next. You spot them. Okay. All right, you can go to the next. Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4. Found 45 on one of our walks in the fells, which is a pretty good thing. All right, next. Did you know lady slippers trick bees into pollinating them? The bees are attracted by the color and smell of the flower and go inside. But once inside, there's no nectar or pollen. And the only way is to escape through a small hole in the back flower. The bees wipe off pollen as they are carrying as they pass through. If you look at a really close-up picture of a bee, it's like covered in pollen. All right, you can go next.
I think that's it.
All right, that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sonia.
I'm Isaac Neese, and today I'm going to be talking about bird feeding next. So I have 4 feeders up currently. I mean, sometimes I have a few more, but the seeds that you see up here, I have Niger seed on the very top. It's oily, it attracts finches and other birds. And that's usually most birds like that, but what's handy about it is the birds that I don't intend to feed, and like squirrels, they all don't like it as well. So I can kind of get songbirds to go on the ground without it getting all pillaged by squirrels and stuff. And then in my tray feeder, which is behind which is right below the little Niger seed feeder I just explained, is I usually put mealworms or just another mix in it. And we like to call them the crowd pleaser, or we call them nachos, because like pretty much all birds will eat it. I mean, like no bird like really has anything against them. And then so next is cracked corn. I usually put that on the ground because cracked corn is usually for birds with bigger appetites and sometimes squirrels. So they can keep on the ground while the songbirds are up in the feeder, and it kind of gives them some formality. Next is black oil sunflower seeds, and this goes from pretty much all birds. Like if you put this up, you almost always get birds for it. At the moment, there's only millet in the feeder, but normally we have some black oil sunflowers mixed in it. So the birds usually eat all the black oil sunflower seeds before they eat the millet usually. So that's why there's only a few millets. And then there's suet. Suet is usually for woodpeckers, and it's in this little house sort of feeder. The reason you can't see the suet is because it's actually upside down on the underside of it. That's because grackles and crows tend to usually eat it all before the woodpeckers get a chance. But with this, grackles and crows are too heavy to hang on the bottom, but woodpeckers are light enough so they can hang on the bottom and eat the suet in peace. And then at the very bottom, it almost looks like a bell, is the squirrel baffle. This prevents all squirrels from going up because it's kind of slippery, and when they try to climb the pole, they just go up into it, and then they can't get around really. And it's pretty funny watching them because they go up into it, and you can just see their tail sticking out, and then later they just slide down because they don't have anywhere else to go. Next. So I also like to, other than bird watching, I also like to draw birds. So the one on the right, I drew the ruby-throated hummingbird, the cardinal and a robin. That was kind of a while back. And then most recently, I drew on the left a black-capped chickadee, which is sitting on a branch. And that's if you've noticed, is the state of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts bird. So, and I kind of like how he looks and stuff, and they go to our feeder a lot. Next. And the scary thing, did you know that bird populations in the US and Canada have declined by 29% since 1970, which is almost like a third of the world's birds, or in US and Canada, have just disappeared since in the past 50 years. So like you can see here, we got a little graph. So like thrushes are been by 20%, 10%. And then like the higher up you go, it's like larks, 67%, like almost over 2/3 of them have like just disappeared in the past year due to habitat loss. So, next please. And that's basically it. So I thought I'd mention that last part just because it's good to like keep birds' nest up and make sure you're safe in your habitat and stuff. And yeah.
So Sonia and Isaac, is there a message that you'd like people to really kind of take away today about nature and spending time in nature and caring about nature?
I think it's an important thing to protect these things because, if we're not careful, they might not be around, and these joys in life it's like we might have to do without them. So I think it's important that you should protect them and like make sure, like you don't have to go out of your way to like put fencing around them, but at least be careful about them and like respect that they're there, and like don't just let it be like an other thing that you can just walk on it or whatever. That's what I take away anyways.
And Sonia?
I think, sorry, can I move in? Sorry.
Just a little closer, yeah.
Yeah. I think that nature is a really big part of my life, and I really love trees, especially. I feel like the world wouldn't be a real world without trees. I love them. Also, we didn't mention this in the slide, but instead of sun, lady slippers really like shade. I really like plants, and I really like plants. I think one of the big important things about the world though is just the thing that comes naturally, not man-made or anything.
Well, thank you, because today is really about celebrating that and how it brings us delight. And we're so glad that you could take part. And I do understand that you had an opportunity to find a 4-leaf clover.
Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah. And that was in your backyard?
Yeah. Oh, actually, we were going on a walk near the bike trail. There's sort of this park area, and I just started searching the ground through patches of clovers, and I found one.
That's wonderful. And you brought that home and pressed it, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, good. Well, thank you. We're going to now turn to Ed Bancy, and Ed has a wonderful story that relates back to Poland and his heritage. And so we're anxious to hear from you, Ed.
Okay, it's a tough act to follow, though. You'll see some of this in the video, but I'll give you a little bit of a heads up to it. My grandmother, my father's mother, was born in Poland, and she actually grew up on a farm, and the farm is still active to this day, run by relatives of my grandmother, nephews and nieces and whoever. I don't know all of them. But So, and she came to this country in 1910 when she was 12 years old. So the farm has obviously been in existence now for well over 100 years. And it's located down in southern Poland near the border with, it's now Chechnya. It used to be Czechoslovakia, but now it's Chechnya. So I kind of just enjoyed gardening. I just like to see things grow and try my hands at different things. I'm not always successful, but you know, there's a lot of experimenting when you go out in the garden. And I'm sure Jim can attest to that. That you try different things, and something grows this year and it won't grow next year. So I think you can cue the video.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ed Banzi, the building manager at First Congregational Church in Winchester. I'm here to talk about my backyard delights, which is my home garden. If you can see the shirt that I'm wearing, says Krakow on it. That's a large city in southern Poland, and it's about 60 miles from the farm where my grandmother grew up. My grandmother came to this country when she was 12, and until she passed away at 101, she spent an awful lot of time with dirt under her fingernails, and she loved to be out in the garden planting and weeding and doing all kinds of things. So I guess it's in my blood from way back. I used to garden in my backyard and until the rabbits and the other critters came along and made it almost impossible to get a high yield out of anything that was being planted. We also have a long-lost relative of Punxsutawney Phil the groundhog who lives here called West Woburn Will, and he would just devour anything and everything in his path. So what I took to doing was to make my garden in containers up on the deck, so that the only ones that can get at it are the chipmunks and the squirrels, and they really don't eat too much. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of what I've got growing up here.
There was a technical difficulty there.
What you can see here are peas, two different varieties of peas, and you can see some of the pods that are coming along fairly nicely. Moving on to this direction, we have just some decorative ferns and Dusty Miller. These are Jetstar tomatoes that are growing here. This tomato is called the Brandywine tomato, and these tomatoes are actually an heirloom tomato from 1885. So this is the same basic strain of tomato that's been growing since 1885 in this country. Moving next to them, we have a little pot full of petunias, just to change the decor, and it brings the bees, attracts the bees to come in and help the pollination process. Under here, you can see maybe a small eggplant up at the top here, and another small eggplant down here. This is a cherry tomato plant that is yellow cherry tomatoes, which are really very, very sweet. I've never had them before. I got in late this year to get my plants from my local farm stand, and so I had to kind of take what I got. But these are really great. I really like them. You can see over here, this is a cucumber. There's actually a couple of them on this plant. I think there's one around to the front here. Yeah, there's a couple of them in here. And this is another Jetstar. These are peppers. There's two different kinds of peppers down here. There are, this is a yellow pepper, very nice, very tasty. And these ones in the back, which hopefully you can see the little red peppers back here. These are what's called a cherry bomb, and they're pretty spicy, but they're great. Chop them up and put them in eggs and things like that. And over here we have this is another Jetstar, and this Jetstar, no, I'm sorry, this isn't a Jetstar, this is a Brandywine, and this Brandywine is getting close to being ripened. And then last but not least, well, I have another plant of the cherry tomatoes. And then finally, last but not least, down here are onions. These were in the ground down in the yard, and the tops got chewed off of them, and I had to dig them out and put them in pots. So that's about it for me, and hopefully you've enjoyed this little backyard delight for today.
Thank you, Ed. I'm wondering, have you picked anything today, and how is it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we've been getting the yellow, the small yellow tomatoes have been coming for weeks now, and I've been getting eggplants occasionally, and I picked that big brandywine tomato that was almost ripe a week ago. That's already been picked, and I picked a few more of the jet stars. So things are coming along. Cucumbers, of course, and it's interesting because my stepmother really is a big eggplant fan. She loves eggplant, and so I usually grow them just for her. I like eggplant, but it's just too much bother to cook it and prepare it and everything. So I usually grow them for her. So I was able to early on get her actually 5 of those. Those are like I think they're called the Chinese or European eggplant. They're the ones that grow really long and narrow. They're not big bulbous things. And so I was able to get her 4 or 5 of those early on so she could make some eggplant parmesan for herself. And I actually had 2 plants that I potted and gave her with the little cages around them and said, just take care of these and hopefully you'll get some eggplants by the end of the season. And
Right.
she's not into gardening like that, but she does love the eggplant. So I thought it was something different, especially where, she's been cooped up just like we all have for months and months. And, and haven't really been able to see her other than to just, call her on the phone and stuff. So I thought that was a good way for her to just get out and do something,
Yeah, sharing the delight. That's
yeah,
a great
exactly.
example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a new way. It's a good example of the many ways that people are reaching out.
Right.
So
Right.
Thank you. And then I think we're just because of time, we want to switch over to Robin, who is going to share with us her experiences in the Reno garden.
Hi, I'm Robin Delury. I have been a member of the church since 1978, and I love to garden. As a matter of fact, when gardening season ends, I go through a slight depression trying to figure out what to do with my time. I spend about 3 hours a day working in either my garden or the Reno garden or even friends' gardens. It's just what gives me joy. And so I also am on, as I said, the Reno committee. And this year we've been making a lot of changes to the hardscape. And I want to show you all those changes we've made and more to come as we prepare the soil for new plantings. So take it away. Hi, welcome to the Reno garden, or your garden, or our garden. The garden was created in 2011 with a generous donation by the Reno family. It is a beautiful place for peaceful meditation and prayer, as well as for the remembrance of loved ones. This year, the Reno Garden Committee made major improvements to the garden. We changed the hardscape to make it more handicapped accessible and restore the beauty of the labyrinth and the walkways. We've recently made changes to the Remembrance Walk, which is to the right as you enter the garden. We found the stone path too difficult for the handicapped access to the labyrinth and lower garden. We put in an aggregate pathway and moved the remembrance bricks to the contemplation garden, since the mulch and dirt from the slope continued to cover and hide the bricks. This is our labyrinth. It has been part of ancient cultures before Christ. It was incorporated into Christian rituals in about the 13th century. Its pathway can be seen as a metaphor for the spiritual journey of life. Walking the labyrinth in meditation quiets the mind, opens the soul, and evoking a feeling of mindfulness and wholeness. The labyrinth has come to be seen as a universal symbol of peace. This path will take you to the contemplation garden that is the new site of our remembrance bricks. The remembrance bricks are inscribed bricks bordering the fountain pond garden. For a small fee, you can have a brick inscribed with the name of someone you love and want to remember. We have plenty of bricks, and I enjoy remembering the past members while I visit the garden. The garden contains a small pond to reflect the sky, with a fountain to symbolize the abundance of life energy and create the soothing sound of trickling water. It is also home to our resident frog. I've named him Jeremiah. This area offers benches to sit and take in the view of the garden and the pond. This stone bench is inscribed with the names of those deceased parishioners whose ashes have been interred around the garden. Come visit our garden and enjoy the gentle breezes that come off of the pond and stir the leaves while you sit. I love the view of Wedge Pond and sometimes bring a book to read while resting on the bench.
Oh, great.
Please remember to bring a mask, since often you will not be alone. I hope you come and enjoy our gardens soon. And if you're interested in becoming a member of the Reno Garden Committee, we're always looking for new gardeners.
Well, that's it. One thing I learned in being part of the Reno Garden is the difficulty in counting on taking care of something that's away from where I live. We had a lot of trouble with the sprinkler system one year and lost many plants and several trees the year of the drought. We found out recently one of the issues we were having was that the excessive use of mulch over the years had caused the ground to become too high in phosphorus, which was not healthy for the plants. So we've stopped mulching, and we're about to remedy the situation of the high phosphorus, low phosphate, and hopefully things will start coming back. One of the things that's come back as we thought 5 hydrangeas on the slope were completely gone and dead. And this year they creeped back to life, and it was exciting to see some blossoms on the small bushes coming back to life. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. I think, again, you're speaking to that whole point of a lot of trial and error and a lot of evolution in terms of how a garden changes. And I think you've captured some of the improvements and the updates and some of the learnings in what you're all doing now.
And also struggling with squirrels and rabbits who like to eat everything that's put in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. Well, I think I'd like to just ask, are there any, if we go back to maybe a landscape of everybody, can we go back and see if anybody else would like to share a backyard delight? Any of the other participants who've come?
Well, I have to say, as well as the church garden, I have had a new experience in working with coleus this year. Last year I grew some, and then I took them in over the winter and kept them, and then I took cuttings and more cuttings, and now I have this glorious garden of multicolored and multi-shaped leaf coleuses that are a lot easier to take care of in the shady area I'm now gardening. So it's been really a delight to find something that the rabbits and squirrels don't eat, that can make me happy seeing how well they're growing, and does quite well. And then it'll keep me busy taking in cuttings and growing them and keeping them over the winter.
Yeah, great. I know Mabs is here, and I'm wondering whether she would like to update us on a delight that she shared with us for the first time last month. Mabs, would you like to unmute yourself first?
I'll unmute myself. I can share with you these. You will probably wonder if they are the same group that I showed you last time. And they seem to be rather sleepy right now, but usually, can you see into the pen if I do, what if I do this?
Down.
Down, okay. Now I see only my own face, which is not what I want to see. Hey, Pops, pop, 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 pop. Well, that's just a mess. Let me pick one up and have him come up here. Hey.
Well, we're hearing that there's some puppies there, but we've lost our picture, so.
Last month, Mabs had showed us they had just been born. So it's even the little bit of a glimpse we got, you get to see how beautiful they are and how much they've grown in just a short period of time. So we'll kind of wait to see if Mabs could come back. And as we are, is there anybody else that would like to add a comment who hasn't talked yet?
I just wanted to say I'm impressed with all of the work of our presenters. It was amazing to see everything from beekeeping to tomatoes and birds. So thank you.
I love the diversity of it all.
The puppy is on my screen. Is she on yours?
Yes. Yep.
One.
How old, Mabs?
He is 6 weeks today.
6 weeks today. And what do they eat?
They eat dog food now. I grind it up. They are playing. They'll be going home in another 2 weeks to their new homes. They're a lot of fun. They're not in my backyard, but they're in my kitchen.
Kitchen delight.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this? I mean,
doing this?
Yeah.
Well, I think we probably had our first litter back in the 70s, but not all the time, just sort of off and on when we have a golden that I think is worth reproducing, and would make nice puppies. I'm very lucky to have the daughter of one of my very best friends who owns the male, and he is a star pupil. He's almost a champion. He'll be there in a little bit. And he and our Annabelle seem to make wonderful pups, and we've met wonderful people doing it. It's such fun. 6 are going to be in Winchester of this litter, which is always fun. So
And I can say, can you hear me, Mabs?
I can hear you, Lynn.
We had one of Mabs's puppies way back in the early 80s. And we just adored her. And we had her for 13 years, maybe. Our kids went off to college and she decided she'd had enough. Wonderful pup.
Well, that's a great story, Lynn, because a lot of them are not making it to age 13 today, but that is getting better, I think, again. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry if you can't see this one because.
Oh, we can.
Oh, he's right there.
Can. Oh, all right.
There.
He's mighty cute. And there are 9 others just like him.
Just so it was just so we can conclude. Is there anyone else that wants to share? I just wanted to mention we have a new backyard. It's only 2.5 years that we've owned it, and so we're getting to know it, and it's very different than our former one. We have a lot of flat area, and we had to do a lot of reclaiming from overgrowth that was very harmful to the trees. So we haven't yet landscaped in a great way, but one of the things that we've taken advantage of this year is the fact that we have so much flat lawn. And so what we did is we purchased a croquet set, and we have totally been enjoying it because you can socially distance, and people are really distant from me because I'm way back at the early wickets, and it's just been, we can separate and yet we can have somebody over and enjoy some activity and some connection through playing ball. So I just mentioned that is another element that we hadn't brought in, is the ways in which to enjoy actively a backyard. But that's the new one we've started this year. So
nice.
So with all of that said,
I just want to say I want to say something to Sonia. I've been out in the woods up here. I live in the west side of Woburn, and we abut the Mary Cummings property. It's right down the end of our street. And I've gone for walks up in the woods with my dogs in the past years, and it's very difficult to find a lady slipper. I find it very, very difficult to find them. And the fact that you found 45 on one walk, that's just amazing to me. You know, I might see 3 or 4 at a time when I would be out with the dog for probably about a 3/4 mile walk in the woods. And I just, it's pretty amazing. I don't know if everybody's seen lady slippers up close, but they're something that's pretty rare, really, to find them. And the fact that you found 45 is pretty cool.
45.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, 45 lady slippers and 1 4-leaf clover. Pretty good eye. She's got a good eye. Well, listen, thanks to everybody. And we want to close, and Megan's going to close us out. And so if we can kind of just gather in all the richness that you've just experienced, and hopefully, again, our themes have allowed you to think about ways that you can connect with nature, you can enjoy it, and that you can be grateful for it. And Megan?
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. So this is our closing reflection. Be in awe of all that is alive. Be in natural wonder. It is the pace of peace. From A Mystic Garden. And here's our blessing as we part. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warmly upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Megan. And blessings to everyone.